We've had a very insightful and wonderful day. I hope you all enjoyed listening to. And we are now reaching towards that end where we've got lots of analysis, lots of information about challenges, opportunities, suggestions. And we had a sort of report that was written by Dan, and there were recommendations in it. Now the time comes when you need to start thinking about what now for Scotland. We've heard the analysis from the world, from UK comparator, and what this panel we are looking to do is to synthesize, summarize, and hopefully come up with some solutions by the end of it. So if post-lunch session, energies are slumping, metabolism is going slow, so let me think about it. Right, I'll start again. Good afternoon. If at first you don't succeed, try, and try again. Who was that? Robert the Bruce, our own very own Scot, who started that to say, inspired by watching a spider. Now, that's not just a folklore. That's a story of boldness, ambition, inspiration, and reckless pursuit of a vision, no matter how daunting the odds are. So since morning when we've listened to, we are thinking, it's like a mountain of challenges, opportunities in relation to world and big economies. Where are we standing and how can we control that? So as we sit for this panel, thinking about how can policy, government, and parliament enable everything that we have heard, innovation-driven economies, and crowding in growth capital for Scotland regions so that the UK economy can grow. I implore you to think for the next 45, 50 minutes about that, channeling that spirit. Because just yesterday, it was the 302nd anniversary of Adam Smith, father of economics. Next year, we will be celebrating 250th anniversary of the Wealth of Nations. So what can we learn from that? Like Robert the Bruce, we can pursue and be relentless. We had Scottish Enlightenment here in Scotland, which showed us that how a nation can be transformed by ideas. Now with data, technology, and human AI on the horizon, we ought to ponder, with all that information available to us, the skills and the information and the talent we have, how can Scotland position itself? What should we do more of? And rather importantly, what should we do less of? What should we stop doing? Where are we wasting our resources? Where are we not putting our behind? So I think if we pause and reflect, maybe it is time for Scottish Enlightenment version 2. We need to gather together, put our brains, everything that has been synthesized. Gordon has brought people together for this wonderful day, and both Jim and Alastair have worked hard for this conference. Now we need to put that into action. From my own personal lens, I'm Dr. Poonam Malik, entrepreneur, investor, board member of Scottish Enterprise, vice president business for Royal Society of Edinburgh. I think I have seen in life what works, but moreover, I have observed and experienced what doesn't work. So in that case, the purpose today is to be bold, to raise our ambition. And I think a lot of you will be thinking from the morning that we are listening to what people have done greatly and how we can get behind that. So we need a growth, but not just for the sake of growth, a growth that creates high-quality jobs for us, and it does so by fueling the industries of tomorrow, because that's where the jobs of tomorrow will come. But we need to do that today, because for that we need people who would have been trained by then, and embedding innovation across every region of Scotland. And for that, we need to analyze what are our strengths. And we've heard a lot about what we need to do there and reach there. And what I'm going to say is nothing new, because each speaker has summarized one part of the other of it. 99.8% significantly are SMEs in Scotland. These are less than 250 employing companies. But they employ 44.4% of the employment in the UK, in the larger 1% of that is left. So to do that, that's our strength and asset. Universities, commercialization, we've been hearing about, but it's the transition gap from early stage to scale up. And clusters and innovation district, which we heard in the first session, We have some examples of that here: GRID, AMID, GSID, BioQuarter, Dundee Health Innovation. But the growth capital which is coming with that. So why is there gap? Culture and chemistry. What do we need of that in our DNA? Do we have it? And do we really need a policy that enables us? Is there something that's stifling us? And that's where this session will think about, because I have with me my colleagues who are focusing on different aspects of it. So we've got an excellent panel. But we need collectively a resolve that we want to make it happen. And I think that's where this session is there. We need that ambition that dares, and not just to catch up, but to lead, because we do have the ingredients that could do that. And in that spirit, I invite all of you to reimagine what is possible within our realm, where policy meets the purpose that we are driving towards. Capital meets courage, criteria of culture, chemistry, and ambition meets action. Let's build an innovation nation, region by region, with boldness, patience, and collective will, because we would need patience both within ourselves and in our capital, and from our investors, not drip feeding. So my fellow panelists will demonstrate how they are putting that plan into action. And to begin that, I will invite Dr. Susie Mitchell. Susie.
Thanks, Poonam. Can anyone hear me? Am I on? Yeah, great. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really sorry, I've got a cold, so I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you for your insightful report, Dan. I really enjoyed reading it and its findings, and I've got some reflections on a few aspects of the report, which I'll talk about in a second. But I just thought first it would be good just to give you a little bit of an introduction to the Innovation District. As many of you in the audience may know, or you may be aware of GRID, we are one of Scotland's largest innovation districts, and we're anchored by the University of Glasgow. So with the right policy conditions and investment support, innovation districts can be the epicentre of place-based growth. We like to talk about GRID as a place where innovation meets opportunity, and GRID is a partnership between the University, Glasgow City Council, and Scottish Enterprise. The district connects world-leading academic research to public, private, and social enterprise, and our collective ambition as a partnership is to invest in and deliver transformational change to reshape the area's physical as well as social landscape, and we've heard a lot about that today, and also to position Glasgow as a whole as a leader in the future of technology and innovation. So we are a 700-acre geography spanning either sides of the iconic River Clyde, and we have a pipeline of enterprising and investable startups and spin-outs, with the University of Glasgow's top spin-outs attracting about 60 million in VC investment in 24-25 and now employing over 250 people. We're actually home to 9,500 businesses in GRID, and as Poonam said, that national statistic reflects kind of that geography in terms of most of those are SMEs, but we have notable large industry anchors from BAE to the BBC, as well as the University and Queen Elizabeth. And actually, GRID accounts for 15% of employment in Glasgow. What is really critical in terms of our distinction is that we have a significant property and land regeneration opportunity in the area. There are many developments underway in GRID, but due to deindustrialisation and depopulation, particularly of the Govan area, we have swathes of vacant land, in fact 85 hectares, with more than 90% of those sites deemed as developable. And with a deep civic mission and opportunity, we want to support those social impacts that we talked about. So we will measure our success, absolutely, to go beyond GVA, to include those metrics which also support, for example, a well-being economy, even more important given the endemic socioeconomic challenges of parts of GRID, including Govan. To Dan's report, I'm going to pick up 3 points. First of all, the lagging business investment. The report talks about the private innovation gap, arguing Scotland needs larger and more innovative businesses. On that, we would argue that growth policy should not take too narrow a view on specific clusters. We would suggest that government interventions and funding should focus more on creating and retaining highly innovative businesses with complementary technologies and enabling infrastructure that is multidisciplinary. Glasgow, for example, has strengths in the critical technologies, which can range from tech from satellite systems to semiconductors, but we also have evidence comparative advantages in the health and life sciences as well as creative industries. So as opposed to assigning a singular rigid cluster to a place, let's recognise the interdependencies between clusters to unlock innovation-enabled long-term growth. Your report also references physical campuses for innovation as a key recommendation. Developers want to do business with this university because they see us as a trusted business partner carrying civic support, and we can take a long-term view on developments. Their confidence is further underpinned by our global standing, our sheer size with 12,000 staff and 40,000 students, and our ambitious capital plan, which amounts to 1.8 billion capital investment over 15 years. And we've demonstrated through this campus redevelopment that we can deliver large-scale projects and in partnership. Our infrastructure portfolio is extremely important in terms of creating that expansion space, the right spaces in the right places for our spin-outs to remain sticky to grid and to Glasgow. The Health Innovation Hub, which is about to open in November this year in Govan, will help, but we suffer from an acute lack of lab space in the city, particularly wet lab space. This will also impact on us attracting business to our clusters. The life sciences facilities are expensive to develop. Therefore, rent must be higher than, say, standard spaces in order to provide a suitable yield on cost for developers and investors to render a scheme viable. The rents we can demand in Govan will not be that of the Golden Triangle or even some of our second-tier peer cities like Manchester. So precision medicine and chemistry-based enterprises would benefit from more de-risking investment from government, particularly in relation to wet labs, to allow small companies to scale here. And finally, the report mentions life sciences as a bright spot. The importance of the key role of further education is also key here. Health Innovation Hub in Govan, to us, represents an exemplar of what can be achieved in terms of place-based infrastructure development. It brings together cutting-edge research, industry, entrepreneurs and community. City deal funding of 1 million covered initial development costs. This helped to crowd in additional investment. We secured 18 million in Strength in Places funding from UK government, contributions from Cadence Science Partner, our operator, as well as Scottish Enterprise and the university bringing this project to fruition. And that shows how this type of government investment can catalyse ancillary private investment. One of the other things I just want to mention here is that we're also co-developing a life sciences qualification between the local college, Clyde College, and the university to create a direct employment route into the Health Innovation Hub complex. And that's where I'll close. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew?
Good afternoon. I must say it's terrific to be back at my old alma mater. So I dissected rats in the Boyd Ward building next door. So I'm Andrew Morris. I'm Professor of Medicine, Vice Principal at Edinburgh. I'm Director of Health Data Research UK, which is the National Institute for Health Data Science, and I'm President of the Academy of Medical Sciences. And I sit on CST with Sol. And it's a great pleasure. Sorry I missed this morning. I had to speak to 500 surgeons in Edinburgh. And I must say, you look a lot more pleasant than they did. So I did have time, however, to read this. And I think it's a good document, and we need to be ambitious for Scotland. And as ever, I would echo Saul, it's not the what, it's the how, and it's delivery. Because I do stuff in Singapore. I sit on A-STAR's council in Singapore. And it reads very similar to this. So it is the how. But I think there are huge opportunities in Scotland. And I'm going to try and convince you of one thing, that as we, in our quest to deliver a single industrial strategy and growth zones, we need to consider data as infrastructure. And we need to double down on data and think about the coordination, connectivity across those growth zones, so that we position Scotland as a single research and innovation site. Because in my world of life sciences, it's arguably the most exciting times in the history of humankind for healthcare, because of this fusion, which we've heard of biology with physical sciences, computational sciences, social sciences, and healthcare. But the common thread of this is assembly of a trustworthy data ecosystem for 5 million people that can interoperate across the UK and across the globe. Now that sounds very aspirational, but you can do it. One country, many systems working as one. Look to Estonia. Population is about 2 million, I think. So they have, they've got about 1,500 public sector systems connected through something called X-Road, delivering 3,000 e-services for the population, very digitally mature, and a substrate or a platform for innovation. And that's what I think that we should aspire to in Scotland. And we can do it. So in my world, I'm a diabetes doctor. 20 years ago in diabetes in Scotland, we joined up those journeys of care using data, primary, secondary, tertiary social care. Within 4 years, we reduced amputations by 50%. We reduced blindness by 40%, and it was a platform for research. Trials, public health, multi-omic data integration. During the pandemic, Scotland led the world in articulating the safety of vaccines, the effectiveness of vaccines, the impact of new variants. We didn't shut down for Omicron. It was very infectious, but because we had Scottish data, we showed it didn't confer morbidity, so we didn't shut down at Christmas. We're doing a study UK-wide with GSK on the Shingrix vaccine, which you'll be familiar with. Molecularly, we think it may protect against dementia and neurodegeneration. So we're running a UK-wide study using data, the prospect of having a future vaccination for dementia. So I think data as infrastructure is key to Scotland. We can do this. Finally, if I've got 1 more minute, do I? Couple of things. We've got great examples across the emergent clusters anyway, in Glasgow, in Dundee, life sciences, Aberdeen, and in Edinburgh. I'm involved in the Edinburgh City deal, that data-driven innovation city deal, which has enabled 3,400 jobs, has worked with over 600 companies, but it shouldn't be an Edinburgh City deal. It should be a Scottish endeavour. And that's the opportunity we have. Why is it important? Because data is the feedstock of AI. And to do AI, you need 4 things. You need compute, you need people, you need money, and you need data. The first 3 sit mostly in industry and mostly in the US. Our distinctive capability in Scotland is curate the data at scale, and it will attract inward investment for the development of the AI models of the future across multiple industry verticals. So, data as infrastructure.
Thank you.
I'll put a timer on. So my name's Lee. I have 2 jobs to get fired from. I'm the Regis Professor of Chemistry at the University of Glasgow and also the CEO of Chemify. So I'm just going to tell you 3 minutes about the journey of Chemify. And if you look really not very bored, I might carry on for a 4th. So engagement is required if you want the 4th minute. So I built a programming language for chemistry a few years ago, and it made all the chemists in the UK quite angry. So I thought that was fun. And so I then worked out if I could then do some research on this. And long story short, I realized that we can make chemistry reproducible. Why do we care? Well, all the molecules you need for drug discovery, all the chemicals, the vast majority of them are all made by hand, and they're all made by hand in India and China. And so all the manual labor is done out there and subsidized primarily by those governments. I wasn't really that aware of that when I started to imagine the company. I just wanted to basically an excuse to be a geek in the lab, right? I was like, I don't care. I make money, I'll go to Silicon Valley. I went to Silicon Valley for a while, and actually we got funding. I think I've raised about, 35 million so far. And that's nothing, right, compared to what AI vaporware is getting out there. But it's kind of exciting. The company started in 2022 with 1 person. We're now at 150 people. I don't know how that happened. I guess you just hire people, right? We're opening our first factory, or Chemifarm, which is 2 miles down the road in Maryhill. And this has been quite an interesting collaborative framing. The council, Glasgow City Council, the university and Scottish Enterprise, as well as the investors have all worked together to help me make this work. Because I had to pluck $10 million out of the air, about 8 million quid I didn't have, and just build it. And I just started to build it and told everyone it was going to work. And we were going to go bust without help. And we got help. Leveling Up, we got all this help. And so that's a fantastic kind of story that's developing. We're still going to go bust at this rate, I'd say, in about 6 weeks. But the good news is we're going to get probably about $10 to $15 million of revenue this year. And next year at Mary Hill, we'll get $25 to $50 million of revenue. So hopefully we won't go bust, because the stupid investors in the US, they're even stupider here, and the comments made earlier, they're just stupid, right? I don't know what to do about it. You know, you say, and me telling them they're stupid is not very helpful either. So don't worry, I don't say this to them. I tell them they're geniuses and they're very stable. The other thing that I'd like to communicate is Chemify would not have happened in Silicon Valley because it didn't have the infrastructure for chemistry. Now, we don't have quite the infrastructure here. I echo the points made, right? We need HIH, we need these other wet labs coming in. I love being in Newhouse here and there. I've got an outpost out there. I love going out to the other side. But I like Glasgow. It's a fantastic city, and I want more tech in the city, please, right? We're building this wonderful campus. We've got a wonderful city. More labs here now. That's one message I've got. I also need 10 million quid to help fit out a laboratory. Not a joke. I'm about to sign a lease. I don't have the money, right? And I've got to make a decision. I made the same decision because I'm going to put another 150 jobs in Glasgow in the next 18 months. So if anyone's got 10 million quid or a route to get it, I'm not joking, perfectly happy to take, even start up an OnlyFans account. I'm very industrious. But joking aside, I think the 4 main points I want to make is Chemify would not have happened in Silicon Valley because with the infrastructure and the depth of investment we've had through EPSRC, the ERC, yes, I've got DARPA grants, yes, I've got an NIH grant, but DOGE don't know how to look for zip codes outside the US. So the Glasgow NIH grant is still going, which I think is quite funny. There is a huge opportunity for integrating manufacturing, right? We have great pharmaceutical manufacturing in Scotland, but I'll tell you a secret, please don't shoot me, it's pretty old. Because the field is old, because we're not thinking about modern server farms for chemistry, and that's going to happen thanks to Chemify if we don't go bust in the next 6 weeks. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, I'm Mary Spowage. I'm the Director of the Fraser of Allender Institute at Strathclyde University. So you can see that Glasgow and Strathclyde universities work closely together to ensure that our research is impactful to deal with the problems that Scotland's facing. I've been reflecting a lot on the contributions today and on the report that Dan's produced, looking at the sorts of policies that could drive innovation-led growth in Scotland. I guess reflecting on the previous session, I think it is really important from a university point of view to think about the collaboration that we do have across the UK to look at particular policy areas, drawing on strengths from lots of different institutions. Quite often, and especially the way that we apply for funding for research for particular areas of interest, we don't see the border there. We work across that border with lots of different institutions. We bring our strengths together. And sometimes that does mean the spillover effects might happen in many different parts of the country. Some research that we've done at Strathclyde, for example, suggests that not only do we do a lot of research and development in our universities in Scotland, we know that from Dan's report, but also the types of research we do tends to be more likely to generate positive productivity spillovers. The impact that we have tends to be the sort of impact that is likely to generate more productivity spillovers. So we're doing more of it, it's more impactful, but those benefits are not always felt within the Scottish economy because of the nature of our collaborations across the UK and perhaps the nature of the wider innovation environment to ensure that those startups can scale up here. So there is a lot to build on. I would argue, or I would say this, I suppose, that it's not necessarily about the research we're doing. It is about that wider environment, ensuring it's turning into economic benefit in Scotland, but I think we all know that. Again, linked to what Susie said, and just reflecting on reading the report, we do need to be honest about the economy that we have and not the economy that we imagine that we have or that we perhaps had in the past. We are a services economy, and it's important to think about the innovations that we can have in services. If you look at the innovation data, products innovation has been fairly stable over the last decade or so. It's business process innovation that's really fallen, and that's a real concern. We need to think about how to generate productivity improvements in services, and obviously things like AI can be a part of that, but really how to distill that throughout the whole of the economy and not focus too much on manufacturing only, which is quite a small part of our economy now. And finally, I'd just like to talk about, which was touched on the last session, about the role of innovation in public services. We all know that there's a fiscal sustainability challenge with our public services. Any of you who know the sort of stuff we do at the FAI know that we focus a lot on fiscal sustainability and the issues around it. There's definitely a place for innovation to ensure that public services can be more sustainable, but the barriers are huge to allow innovative technologies and approaches to get into the delivery of public services. We recently did a report on innovation in social care, for example. And what we have is pilot after pilot after pilot of something that's amazingly impactful, but then the barrier to actually get it into service delivery is just huge because of the commissioning process, the procurement process, and so on. And so I really think there's a massive opportunity here for the procurement of public services to be harnessing these innovative approaches, which will also generate, more positive economic spillovers in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Right, so we have policy analysts. Dan, who's spoke in the morning, so I'm not letting him speak. I'm allowing time for you all to ask questions. We've heard from ecosystem builders. We've had clinician, data science people. We have chemists, entrepreneurs, and professors, and we have economists who analyze. So you've had the whole day. Before politicians come at the end of the session, this is your last chance to ask the people who are doing the things. So fire on your questions before I start. Anybody, because we need a little bit more energy in the room. Right, where are the mic people, please? Okay, start there, please.
Hi, Poonam.
Hello.
Hi. One thing I really wanted to ask about this is that how could we really make sure private sector can really invest strategically upfront rather than freeloading off the public sector investment? We in the civil service, we always have to deal with this constantly, is that, of course, there's a limitation to what government can invest as such. And we still, even to this day, haven't really figured out how we can really get that alchemy working and going. Mm-hmm. And that means their long-term commitment can be assured if they're upfront about it. Okay. But if they come later, first come late, you join later and you also jump faster as a lot of the train. So this is something I just wanted to hear from members. I didn't get a chance to ask it earlier from the experts there, but yeah.
Yeah, so I hear you're asking how can private sector invest upfront rather than co-investment from the public sector.
One quick thing to say, as an academic inventing something, I could do my academic thing and publish a few papers. But I think we absolutely have to demonstrate to each other we can go out and innovate, right? And I think it is, if we can encourage academics and other innovators to just go out and raise money. I just got on a plane and demanded money, and probably was ruder than I was earlier. But I think the reason why we got the money is we demonstrated competence, passion, persistence. So one of my dreams about what will happen in Scotland and in Glasgow in the innovation corridor is by leading by example, there'll be others. I've already raised more money for my second company, which is a Ken Brain, one of my postdocs who's going to do that. It'll be easier for him, hopefully, right? He's going to make a first artificial consciousness. Easy. A couple of billionaires invest in it. So we just need to get that rolling. There is nothing magic about Silicon Valley. In fact, they're all fraudsters as far as I can work out. So we need to encourage more fraudster-like behavior here. Now, what did I mean by that? Not quite. I just mean more ambition.
Thank you. And I'm sure, Saul, you'll have a view on it. But as far as I can imagine, in certain circumstances, people get used to this, that the public sector take more risks. But I think the public sector role is very different in terms of doing additional things, which Andrew was trying to say. It's the private sector that traditionally takes the risk, and that's where the mindset is, that we don't become too much dependent on grantpreneurs and them doing it. They have a different place to do it. Saul, do you have a view on it?
I'll just say that you weren't there that day, Lee, but I have visited your lab, and it's absolutely incredible what you and the team are doing there. And I think, exactly like you say, being a role model, going out, raising money, showing people what's possible, you know, it's doing, not talking, that really matters. So,
Yeah.
you know, this is... I often say some of the best computational chemistry in the world is happening in Glasgow. And I say that because I visited the lab. And I think, you know, more people need to come, more people need to see, but it also means going out, not just expecting people to come in.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I can say it from personal examples, whereas we have a very supportive public sector ecosystem, but despite that, the money we have raised, we've had interest from US and China, and we have taken both those money or taking. So it's a sad state of affairs, but the reality is like that. Next question, please. Yeah, okay. And there was some, yeah, after that, the lady in blue.
Hello, my name is Gordon Ritchie from a Glasgow-based company called GRM. I've been quite extensively involved in setting up a business, a technology business, with some Canadian and Australian business partners based over in Montreal. So we've been working extensively with Montreal University on the technology, and one of my business partners is Australian and one of the biggest commercial farmers, arguably in the Southern Hemisphere. We are working extensively with China just now, and the process with China is an absolute dream in comparison to Canada, Quebec, of course, with the same problems that Scotland does have politically. But the pace and speed that we are trying to launch this product is, we're launching in February 2026, and we've already got listings with AliExpress after 3 months of legals on listings with them, but it was a very efficient service. I was taken aback by my Australian partner 2 weeks ago when we said, where are we going to have the business core? And before I'd even time to say, oh, we'll have it in Glasgow, he said, well, we're certainly not doing it in Great Britain. And I said, whoa, okay. And the other two came in and said, no. He said, not Britain. It's over-regulated. The process is far too slow. And if we're going to operate, we need to operate efficiently. And I'll leave it with that. The question is, why are we? And I notice we've got 2 doctors up there and 3 professors. My business partners are businessmen. They're out there to earn money and employ people. And we're talking about employing people in Scotland. How are we going to do that if our processes and our bureaucracy are so regulated?
Yeah. You raise a very critical point of the speed of decision-making and how many hoops. I suppose to some extent that also goes down to what kind of money you are taking and who's required, because private sector can make decision fast, public sector has to cover their, no, I won't speak the French. Any thoughts from the panel?
I don't echo that. I don't know what you're talking. I mean, if you've got a specific regulation, you want to bulldoze. It's one of my favourite things about being in Glasgow. When people said no, I just said, no, how? And so, yeah, maybe I don't understand financial regulations, but I do understand a bit now. You know, we don't launder money here.
Yeah.
You can do in some places, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I would say come up with specifics and lobby. Tell them.
Yeah. So I think we've discussed various different points of decision-making. There might be time in spinning out process. There might be time in trials. There might be time taking an approval process of the products. And whoever your partners are, that can be challenges. Certainly, there is a need for improvement, and various processes can be improved. Andrew, do you want to say anything from the government side of things? There.
Government spokesman, but I mean, look, every situation is different, and I tend to agree with Lee that, you know, I've actually lived and worked in Australia. I have a lot of knowledge of Canada, and neither of them strike me as being super free of regulation compared to what we have here in the UK. So I just wouldn't generalize your experience. I think there's a bit of a rush to judgment there, but equally, I mean, to be fair, I mean, and I will sound like a government spokesman, the government has actually put a big accent on regulation or deregulation. It's had the regulators in, and certainly both on the financial side and some of the other side, people and businesses have noticed a change. So they are doing something about it. I'm not convinced that's the biggest impediment. Worthwhile cleaning up. But most of the analysis would suggest it's in planning that we lose the most in terms of innovation and investment, and not in some of the things that you're talking about. But, you know, there may be cases where, of course, those other countries will win, but I wouldn't generalize your experience, because that wouldn't really completely add up to some of the more kind of comprehensive studies that have compared regulations between those three countries.
Thank you. Dan?
Can I offer a bit more of an oblique reflection based on that comment? So a lot of what we've been talking about today presents the problems that we face as if they're technological, and maybe we're about to burst through a load of those technological barriers, as Michael set out earlier, because of AI and other structural changes, or they're technical in the sense that if only we could identify this particular piece of regulation or that particular blocker, we would be able to turn the dial on it, unblock that, and then everything would be fine, right? And there's a single switch that we can flick. I think that gets it wrong, because part of what we're describing here is our capacity as a community and as a society to tolerate certain levels of change. And how we manage that process of our collective kind of self-identity, our collective tolerance for innovation and change is really important. And the reason this question about regulation has flared up this thought for me is because when we think about regulation, we're trying to balance the impulse for growth, the impulse for economic development, with other values that we as a society have determined are very significant and important, like environmental protection, social rights, and so on. We're always going to be navigating those conflicting claims and trade-offs. If we want to get into a world in which we have greater tolerance, Chinese style, for that kind of dynamism and creative destruction, I'm all for it. That's the spirit of the conference today. But we need to situate it in that wider conversation in our, I think this is really, maybe it's a segue into the next section, because I think it's really a challenge to our political leaders of how do they help people identify their role in the future that we're trying to build, and build their confidence that they will be supported, they will have the social insurance and social protection, so that they can face this change and this dynamism with confidence, rather than with a sense of anxiety, a sense of insecurity, which drives those regulatory barriers to try and protect and insulate rather than empower.
Thank you. Andrew, you want to?
If I might just add to that, I'll shout, because by the time we get microphone, we're short for time, but I think that's very well said. You know, it's very easy to say, I cannot eat this country because of the regulation, rather than looking into yourself and saying, do I need more innovative products to compete? And there's a lot you can do with innovation by being innovative, right, in my view.
And it's incumbent on us, when we think about policy as well as the products, to say, what is it that might provoke a backlash? You know, where's the limit of toleration, and how do we colour out policies given that?
Andrew?
So I think we would all, can you hear me? We would all subscribe that on the supply side, an agile and adaptive regulatory system is what we want. And one would think that post-Brexit we would have more room to manoeuvre. And I would say that the current government does seem to want to address this, reduce complexity, and have a pro-innovation regulatory environment. At CST last week, David Willits came along, and they are looking for case studies driven by business need in terms of what would make a difference. So, and initially I think they're focusing on drone, space, medicines discovery, and engineering biology, just to try and get a more agile and adaptive approach to regulation.
Thank you. I suppose we have plenty questions. There will be some availability after that, but we are short on time. So thank you for your time, and thank you to the panel.